Really happy with the look and feel of the game. It went through numerous stages of development, and in the beginning it was planned to be a realistic military shooter compared to the more cartoony look we're all familiar with today. When it was first shown at E3 in 1999, it was called Team Fortress Brotherhood of Arms. But after the reveal at E3, the game wasn't officially mentioned again until 7 years later, in 2006. During this time, another version of the game was leaked named Team Fortress Invasion. This version had scrapped the realistic look for a futuristic sci-fi game featuring a war between humans and aliens. It was later revealed that Valve had quietly built 3 or 4 different games before settling on the final design. In 2007, 8 years after the release of the first installment, Team Fortress 2 was released to the public. In a promotional video for the game called Meet the Spy, there's a fight scene between the characters the Spy and the Sniper. During the fight, the Spy manages to cut the Sniper on the left side of his cheek. After the release of the video, the Sniper's in-game player model was updated to add the scar that the Sniper actually got in the video. The voice lines,
"No other class gonna do that. If you order now, I'll throw in a second beating, absolutely free. Look at this, just caved in your skull, my bat's still dry. No clumps of hair, nothing."
Were added in the Scout update to the game after fans noticed a resemblance between the Scout and TV pitchman Vince Offer. Offer is best known for being the pitchman for the Sham Wow commercials, and that's exactly what these lines are referencing. There are so many references and Easter eggs in this game. For example, the spy knife, your eternal reward, is a reference to the dagger used by Jafar in Aladdin. The wooden section of the Liberty launcher has a crack on the right side, which is a reference to the famous Liberty Bell. The name of the Dalacus bar is actually the Russian word for chocolate spelled backwards. The bow tie Dr. Whoa is of course a reference to Doctor Who. The weapons Babyface Blaster and the Pretty Boy pocket pistols are references to the famous 1930 criminals George Babyface Nelson and Charles Pretty Boy Floyd. The hat familiar fez is a reference to the character Mustafa from the movie Austin Powers 2. The AppSap is a reference to Wheatley from Portal 2. One of the taunt kills for the Pyro is called Hadouken. This is of course a direct reference to Street Fighter. It's from Street Fighter. Can I at least finish the sentence before? When the red tape recorder is slowed down by about 80%, you can hear that it's actually someone saying, "Let's make some noise." In early development, the game was planned to feature grenades, and for those of you who played the first installment might remember that grenades were a strong feature in Team Fortress Classic. It's later been explained that they decided not to use them in the end because they were afraid players would rely on them too heavily and start spamming them instead. Thus, they were removed from the game entirely. The inside of the virtual viewfinder has a texture with the text "Game Over." The texture for the hazmat head case has a hidden note in the corner that means Sparkwire loves Primrose forever, both of whom are credited for the item's creation. The Neon Annihilator's battery has a nod to the Face Punch forums that reads "Death to Face Punch." If a scout is blown up, there's a 1 in 100 chance that a dove will fly out of his body. This is a reference to the final scene of the promotional video Meet the Medic, where Archimedes is revealed to be stuck inside the scout's chest. The two teams featured in the game, Red and Blue, is actually not named after the colors. The red team stands for Reliable Excavation and Demolition, and the blue team stands for Builders League United. As Team Fortress 2 doesn't have any type of story or campaign mode to speak of, it's not surprising that a lot of players are unaware of the extensive universe in which the game actually takes place. This universe and its sort of hidden storyline has slowly been revealed through the use of comics and promotional videos for the game. The story begins in the early 19th century with a man named Zephaniah Munn. Along with his wife, he has 3 sons named Redmond, Blutarch, and Gray. For those of you who's been paying attention, this is also the main reason why the teams are named Red and Blue. Anyhow, Redmond and Blutarch were born perfectly normal, but Gray was born underweight, so Zephaniah ordered the baby to be smothered. However, before he could do so, Gray was abducted by an eagle and managed to survive. Yeah, I know, a fucking eagle. Skipping forward a few decades, and Zephaniah is now nearing the end of his life, and thus decides to divide the land that he owns into 2 equal parts, one for Redmond and one for Blutarch. Given the nature of the game, it's not so hard to figure out what happens next. The 2 brothers each hire a team of 9 mercenaries to take over the land of the other, and there you have the basic premise of the actual game. But the war between the 2 brothers continue, and we need to jump forward another few decades into the mid to late 20th century where the game actually takes place. By this time, the 2 companies, Red and Blue, have been formed and are now controlled by a woman named Helen, also known as the Administrator. The brother Gray is still alive and manages to kill Redmond and Blutarch, who was also still alive through the use of a life-extending machine. After Gray successfully assassinates his 2 brothers, he starts a war against the corporation using his robot arm. The early history of Sweden begins around the 9th century when Swedes were merchant seamen well known for their far-reaching trade. You know them as Vikings, and Viking actually means to go on an expedition or to go raiding. Modern Sweden begins in 1397 when the Scandinavian nations were collectively called Kalmar Unionen, or in English the Union of Kalmar. But during these years, diverging interests gave rise to a conflict that would hamper the union and ultimately leads to a definite breakup in 1523 when Gustav Vasa became king of Sweden. Sometime after Gustav Vasa had ascended the throne, something called the Swedish Empire was formed, and then we had a galactic war spanning several decades fighting against the Swedish Republic and the Jedi Vikings.
Ja men Lukas, jag är ju för fan din pappa.
But that's for another video. No, but seriously, during this time Sweden was actually one of the great European powers, and this time is even referred to as Stormaktstiden, which roughly translates to the Great Era of Power. But in early 18th century, Sweden took part in the Great Northern War, which was disastrous for Sweden to say the least. Throughout the 18th and 19th centuries, Sweden lost most of its previously conquered territories, and these would later begin the formation of Norway and Finland. But despite its long history of war and conflicts with the neighboring countries, Sweden has stayed neutral ever since 1814. Sweden is one of the most internet-active countries in the world. In fact, with a population of 9.5 million, there's about 500,000 people who are not using the internet in any way. So, statistically speaking, we're 4th in the world, only beaten by a few percent by Norway, Iceland and the Falkland Islands. Sweden also has the largest proportion of personal computers in Europe, with 500 PCs per 1,000 people. The world's largest scale model of the solar system exists in Sweden. It is in the scale of 1 to 20 million and stretches 915 kilometers from the capital Stockholm all the way to Kiruna. The huge spherical building named Globen in Stockholm represents the sun, and then the planets as well as dwarf planets along with some larger asteroids are spread out across the country. Swedes are apparently very good at recycling waste products. In fact, only 4% of all waste generated ends up on landfills. But although this may seem like it could only be a positive and maybe even enviable achievement compared to countries where this is a problem, Swedes are actually too good at it. We're so good at recycling waste that we have to import more waste from Norway. 80,000 tons every year to be exact. This is because Sweden relies on waste to heat and provide electricity to hundreds of thousands of homes through a waste to energy program. So we're basically recycling our fuel. In Japan, there's a town called Sweden Hills, and it's exactly what the name suggests, a town that looks exactly like a regular Swedish neighborhood. The idea began after the Swedish ambassador visited the town and remarked how similar the atmosphere and scenery was to his native Sweden. Only a few years ago, video games was considered to only be played by, should I say, nerds. Today, gaming is everywhere, with people on YouTube, for example, making a living simply by letting people watch them play video games. But you truly must realize how far gaming has come when only last year a school in Stockholm, Sweden started introducing compulsory Minecraft lessons. This was done by teachers hoping the Swedish computer game would help the children to further develop their thinking. Like any other country, Sweden is the source for a lot of inventions and companies that are widely popular today. For example, Anders Celsius was the inventor of the now called Celsius thermometer scale. Alfred Nobel invented dynamite as well as instituted the Nobel Prize. Niels Bohlin invented the safety belt, Gideon Sundbeck invented the modern-day zipper, Baltzar von Platen and Carl Munters invented the refrigerator, one of the first mobile phones was invented by Swedes in 1956. IKEA was founded in 1943, the Swedish site The Pirate Bay is the largest BitTorrent site in the world. Spotify is one of the largest music streaming sites in the world. The popular car manufacturers Volvo, Saab, Koenigsegg and Scania were all founded in Sweden. H&M, which actually stands for Hennes och Mauritz, is the second largest clothing retailer worldwide. And Absolut Vodka is the third largest brand of alcoholic spirits in the world and is sold in 126 countries. Sweden is one of the few countries in the European Union to still retain its own currency and not use the euro. The currency is called krona, which was introduced in 1873. $1 is about 6.5 Swedish crowns. But Sweden is actually obligated to adopt the euro at some point since it joined the European Union. However, using a loophole in the law, it's been able to declare itself ineligible. The only other two European Union countries also to refuse to adopt the euro are Denmark and the United Kingdom. The shortest name for a location in the world exists in Sweden as well as Norway and only consists of one letter, the letter called Å. Because in Swedish we have 3 extra letters at the end of the alphabet, namely Å, Ä and Ö. Ö can mean island and Å is a word for river. We all know that my English is absolutely flawless, beautiful pronunciations such as character, Danish, jello, and let's not forget rural. Sweden actually has a higher percentage of English speakers than Canada, and it's only about 8% behind the United